The Carolina Panthers wrapped up training camp with a spirited joint practice with the New York Jets on Thursday morning. I'll tell you what I saw right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and of course, Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Wednesdays throughout the rest of the preseason and through the entirety of the regular season, I'm right here on the show answering your weekly Wednesday mailbag questions. How do you get those questions in, you ask? Well, you either at me or DM me, but of course, follow me on Twitter at Julian Council to get those questions in for next week's edition of the weekly Wednesday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Training camp, it is in the books. 15 practices in and 15 practices are done as Panthers head into their week 2 preseason match on Saturday night at Bank of America Stadium against the New York Jets. Then next Saturday, they're on the road in Buffalo. And in a couple of weeks after that, they'll be down in New Orleans on Sunday for week 1 of the NFL regular season. And we are almost there, folks. They did wrap up training camp on Thursday with a joint practice against the New York Jets. Dave Canales and Robert Saleh go back for years as good friends. You have Nathaniel Hackett, the OC for the Jets, and Ejiro Evero, the DC here in Carolina, also close friends. So it made a lot of sense for both the Panthers and the Jets to have this joint practice. They had one last year with Frank Reich as head coach and Saleh still there in New York, and they decided to do it again this year leading up to that preseason game on Saturday. And I was there at practice on Thursday morning, and I have a lot to talk about from what I saw during what was a very spirited affair as the Panthers and Jets got in close quarters a couple of times after the whistle, thanks to some shenanigans from a few players out there on Thursday morning. Yesterday, I talked about what I wanted to see on offense and what I want to see on defense. Going to split this up the same way. What I saw offensively, defensively, then I'll get into what Dave Canales had to say to us after the practice. And also, there's concerns about the injuries that are piling up, especially in the Panthers secondary. J.C. Horn's not one of them, but there are some other guys out there that are, and we'll get into that here on the show today. Starting off with the Panthers offense, the number one thing I was looking for entirely when it came to joint practices on Thursday was the offensive line and how they were going to perform against the New York Jets defensive line, one of the best defensive lines in the NFL. I was excited to see how the interior faced off against Quinnen Williams, but unfortunately, Quinnen Williams had a shoulder injury and he did not practice on Thursday, robbing me and robbing you and the Panthers the opportunity to face off against one of the best defensive linemen in the NFL. Of course, I already have Derek Brown, who's also one of the best defensive linemen in the NFL, but a new challenge would have been nice to have seen out there on Thursday mornings. Did not get to see that, but I was watching intently the 1v1s against the Jets. Damian Lewis, who has been ramping back up conditioning after he missed 3 practices with a family matter. He also was out there today, but he was only participating in individual drills, was not out there for 1v1s or red zone period or 11v11 later on during practice. Instead, it was Chandler Zavala filling in for him at left guard. And understand this, y'all, that if this were the regular season and the Panthers were actually playing the Jets, Quinnen Williams actually would have played. That's what Robert Saleh, the head coach in New York, said. Also, you would have had Brady Christensen in there at left guard. You would not have had Chandler Zavala. Zavala, they kept him at left guard with the ones just to have the continuity of him staying at the same position. They're not really trying to cross-train him at left guard and right guard. They want him purely to be a left guard. So that's why he's been out there as a starting left guard in those situations during training camp. He had a couple decent reps. Robert Hunt, one time, he did kind of whiff on one of those. That would have been an easy stack. Taylor Moton, his first rep wasn't the best. He has struggled at times during training camp. But overall, I felt like the offensive line held their own against that Jets defensive line. The second thing I was looking at heading into this, well, there's really two more things offensively. Bryce Young, how he was going to perform, because obviously this season's about Bryce Young and whether the Panthers have the right coach to develop him and whether they have the right quarterback at all. I don't think, unless things are just a disaster, and the Jets would know about that, as Zach Wilson was their number 2 overall pick a couple years ago, and he's no longer in New York just based off how bad he was his sophomore year and also how bad he was last year once Aaron Rodgers went down. Bryce Young would have to be that bad, I think, for the Panthers to consider a move like the one the Jets made last year by bringing in Aaron Rodgers. I just don't think he's not going to be the quarterback next year unless just things are terrible, he gets injured. That would have to be the scenario, in my opinion, for Bryce Young not to be the guy. So wanting to see what he had to do, what he could do against the Jets was obviously important to me. And also, Deontay Johnson wasn't going to be out there. He was not out there. Did not see him at all on Thursday. Adam Thielen, we know what that connection with Bryce Young is. What about the backups? What about Terrace Marshall Jr.? What about Jonathan Mingo? Xavier Legette, potentially? What were they going to show? And in red zone period, the first time we got to see the Panthers offense fully against the Jets defense, he went out there and he was cooking. Adam Thielen, Terrace Marshall Jr., Jonathan Mingo, that was a trio of wide receivers. Tavion Sanders, the rookie tight end out of Texas, he was also out there with the starters. Right off the bat, Bryce Young finds Adam Thielen for a quick out route. He was up against DJ Reed, one of the better corners in the NFL, for that reception. Then later on, Bryce Young throws a beautiful fade route to Terrace Marshall Jr. for a touchdown. Then a couple of plays later, they do it all over again. On the other side of the end zone, throws another gorgeous fade route to Terrace Marshall Jr., who makes an outstanding diving catch against DJ Reed, gets up, celebrates, and drops the football right on DJ Reed, which then leads to, you guessed it, a fight. Dave Canales did not like that one bit. He came out later on and spoke to us after practice, and he called it dumb football, saying how football is too hard. The margins are too hard. You can't give the opponent anything. And Terrace did come back and apologize also for that. But you like to see him making plays. And it's not the best look for a guy who last year wanted to be traded, doesn't get traded because he doesn't have a market. Then when he plays again, can't line up correctly. That leads to an illegal formation, which brings back a touchdown, one of the best plays we saw all season from Bryce Young and the Panthers offense. And last week, can't catch the ball. This week, things start out great. And then he does that. And that's the most mad I've seen Dave Canales so far when speaking to him. That guy is always just jubilant, happy, smiling, and he was not happy. He wasn't yelling. Didn't really have that frown, but you could tell he was pretty ticked off by that. But TMJ making some plays. So kudos to him to step up in that situation, even though he may not have helped his cause overall just based off of his decision to do that, which was kind of funny in the moment. Like, it was pretty damn disrespectful the way he dropped the ball, but a hell of a play by him to get that touchdown over DJ Reed. There was another reception to Thielen later on during that red zone period from Bryce Young. That would have been a touchdown, but they blew it dead right there as they weren't really tackling. Bryce Young also had a touchdown run after being flushed up the middle. May have been a sack, but he got in there, scored a touchdown. So we got to see the mobility from Bryce today in that red zone period. Some other things, too, from that period. Jack Plummer was running with the twos. Andy Dalton is back. He was throwing during individual drills, but much like a couple other players, he was not out there once they got into the red zone 11v11. Those team periods, he just allowed guys like Jack Plummer and Jake Luton to get that opportunity. And there's something different than I've seen before with Jake Luton here now. And Jack Plummer having struggled last Thursday in that preseason opener in New England. They're putting Luton out there a lot more than they have in the past. And he's looked better than Plummer in the preseason and at practice. The 2 times I've been out there today. Overall, that red zone period, Bryce Young was 4 for 4 with a touchdown or 2 touchdowns through the air and then another one on the ground if they didn't technically rule it down. As far as a sack goes, Xavier Legette, he was out there as well for individual practice or individual drills, rather. He was not out there for red zone or 11v11. An update on him later on as I get into what Dave Canales had to say to us following practice. Going to the 11v11 period for the offense, Panthers offense versus Jets defense today. Brady Christensen had to go in at right guard for Robert Hunt, who was carted off after the red zone period. Did not see what happened to him when watching it there at that point in time. Brady replaced him And then Hunt eventually did come back out there on the field. Everything was okay there with Robert Hunt. It was a knee injury, just a scare. And it's kind of like Xavier Legette. They looked at it, thought that maybe it's a season ender. Turns out not a season ender. Robert Hunt, he came right back in later on for 11v11 during the second period of that. So it's good to see that that was not anything serious. Terrace Marshall Jr. made another catch over the middle to continue his good day. There was another fight once the twos were out there. Mike Boone got got into it with somebody from the Jets, and that started up another one of those fights. And another thing that happened too with the ones, Chandler Zawala, he went down with an injury. He has a hamstring. We'll talk more about that. There was a pretty big wrap on his right thigh. So Andrew Rame, the third string center, undrafted free agent out of Oklahoma, he actually went in at left guard when Zavala went out, and Brady Christensen then moved over, was still there at right guard. That's not ideal. Now, later on, once Hunt came back in that second period, Christensen went over to left guard. And again, to illustrate, if this is actually the regular season, it would be Christensen filling in for Hunt or for Damian Lewis in a situation that either one of those guys unfortunately went down. But it speaks to just how thin these margins can be when you get down to a joint practice against a Jets team, a good Jets football team, and you're having to throw out an undrafted free agent who's not even a left guard out there at that left guard spot. It's not ideal in that situation. Then one more semi-fight broke out. Chuba Hubbard caught a ball from Bryce Young, was running out to the left side. He slipped, then took a shot from Chuck Clark, the safety from the Jets. I saw it. I was on the other field looking over. I was trying to pay more attention to defense at this point in time, but I looked over, saw it, and I was like, man, Chuba just got cracked, and it looked like he held his knee immediately after that happened, and he did. He did hold his knee, but initial tests so far show that there's no damage there, that he's totally fine. So the Panthers, again, avoid another scare. Because I saw that, and I was thinking to myself, man, if that cart comes out, that's not a good situation at all. But Jonathan Brooks already dealing with his torn ACL and trying to get back, and he's likely going to miss the first 4 weeks at least this season. And Chuba's supposed to be the number one guy. Miles Sanders didn't play well last year. They like Mike Boone a lot, and that's a name. He was out there returning kicks during special teams kickoff return period. It feels like he's going to make this roster. So just point that out there to you. We got three guys, I think, for sure. Well, two for sure. Chuba, Miles. I feel good about Raheem Blackshear, but if Mike Boone's also returning kicks, maybe Raheem Blackshear is going to be the odd man out here in Carolina. So pay attention to that moving forward. They avoided some serious injuries. Hunt, he's fine. Chuba Hubbard, he's fine as well. Took a big lick, and Dave Canales came out and said that his foot slipped, and he feels like that was what caused the injury, not the hit itself. And the fact that he slipped, that's what led to more of the collision than anything else. Because, again, these guys weren't out there headhunting. This was not – it was physical because, it's football. They're going to be physical. But it wasn't one of those things where you had guys out there really trying to lay the wood on anybody during either one of those team periods at all. That was just an unfortunate situation where Chuba slips, and it looked a lot worse than it was intended to be, I suppose. And then Bryce Young later on had a nice deep corner route to Jonathan Mingo. The only time I think I really saw Mingo make a play during 11v11, not saying that's the only time he did make a play. The only time I saw is they were on two different fields trying to pay attention to both sides of the ball and really get some takeaways. But that's how they performed. I felt like the Panthers offense was really good against the Jets defense during the red zone period and 11v11 period. Absolutely. I thought Bryce Young, he looked sharp. He was accurate. He was outstanding. TMJ made some good plays. Thielen wasn't that involved. I liked what I saw also from the run game. And the fact that they avoided a serious injury to Chuba and Robert Hunt, that's a good thing, obviously, for this team. So I felt like the offense for the Panthers won when going up against the Jets defense on Thursday morning for their final training camp day and their joint practice against the Jets. What about the defense? Didn't get a chance to pay too much attention to the defense, but I did talk to some people covering the Jets who were following Aaron Rodgers and our offense. I'll talk about what I saw and also what I was told here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With Carol last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. And if you want to go to the preseason game on Saturday night, I looked over at Gametime, and I'll do it right now as I'm talking to you. The other day, I saw tickets for only $8 to go see the preseason. And let's be honest, preseason's an abomination. And the fact that they charge people all that money is insane to me. Right now, looking at it, $9. That is the get-in price if you want to go row 15, section 525, Bank of America Stadium on Saturday night. 7 to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. The Panthers defense has a ton of changes heading into the 2024 season. But one of the good things is when you look at the additions of guys like Josie Jewell, you look at Jordan Fuller, plenty of these players have been in Ejiro Avero's system. Also, got a lot of guys returning from last year who are also in this system, and the entirety of the defensive coaching staff is back here in Carolina. So plenty of changes when it comes to personnel on defense and, of course, on offense and throughout the organization. But the one thing that's stayed the same is the defensive coaching staff and really the understanding of the players that are now here in that scheme, whether they have been in Carolina, Denver, or LA. And Thursday was an opportunity for them to go up against one of the best quarterbacks in the history of the game, Aaron Rodgers, coming off that torn Achilles. He was out there. He's not going to play in the preseason, but he was available as he has been throughout training camp against the Panthers on Thursday. And three things I was looking for: what the defensive line looked like, especially against the run, the pass rush, whether it would be one, and the backup corner. I did not watch as much as I would have liked to, and I understand, too, that the biggest concern that Panther fans have about this team is the offense. The offense was terrible last year. The defense, even though J.C. Horn missed a ton of time, Shaq Thompson missed a ton of time, Jeremy Chin was phased out but also missed a ton of time. You had Von Bell, Xavier Woods out for a period of time. They still held on. They weren't terrible. But really the worst game they had all season long was against the Packers late in the season. And there was times earlier in the year against the Dolphins where they weren't great. The Lions, of course. Well, look where the Lions went. Look where the Dolphins went into the playoffs, and look where the Packers went. So it makes sense that they would struggle without some of those guys out there. But overall, they were pretty solid unit considering all that they went through. And there's numbers that say they were an elite unit. There's also numbers that say they weren't that great, but there's a reason why they weren't that great. I give a lot of credit to the guys who stepped up last year and to Ejiro Avero and his staff. And I'm still trying to figure out what my expectations overall are for this defense. I don't think they're going to be that good, but I think they're going to be good against the run. Didn't get to see a lot of them against the run, against the Jets. Breece Hall, really good running back. Great challenge for them. Maybe we'll get to see them on Saturday night in the preseason. Dave Canal is still up in the air and whether that's going to happen. The pass rush, didn't really see a lot of it when I was paying attention. I did talk to Antoine Staley, who used to cover the Panthers, now covers the Jets. The New York Daily News was talking to him about what he had seen during red zone period. Aaron Rodgers apparently only went 1 for 4, had an interception. Now the INT was a ball that bounced off of Alan Lazard's hands into Alex Cook's, and great play again by Alex Cook, a guy, when I'm looking down the road, this is somebody with 3 safeties who currently are going to be free agents after the season. Alex Cook may work his way into being a starter down the road. We'll see. But he makes a play, which seemed to be more the receiver not catching the ball. DiCaprio, Boodle, and Lamar Jackson, also Deshaun Jameson. Those were the guys that were in at corner. That was more Boodle and Jameson rotating and Lamar Jackson sitting out there as the other starter, which pretty much solidifies his spot as the number 3. Dane Jackson, of course, he was not out there as he's dealing with a hamstring injury. More on that here in just a moment. J.C. Horn, he was out for individuals, and he was not in there for any of the team drills. I'm not sure whether he did 1v1s, was not down there to see that. But that's kind of the red zone period from the defense. Looking at 11v11, from what I saw, looking at least the second period that they did 11v11, I was focused more on the offense today. Ekeliota and DJ Johnson were the 2 starters at outside linebacker. They didn't seem to get all that much pressure. Then later on, during that team period, Aaron Rodgers throws what was a terrible ball, and Trevon Wallace intercepts it. And that's a guy who this staff likes a lot. Shaq Thompson, he's back to health. Josie Jewell, he's been around this whole time as well. Those are going to be the 2 starters. And I had wondered going into the season, how much their third-round pick out of Kentucky was going to play with those two guys available. Based off of what I've heard from people I've talked to and also what I've seen, Trevor Wallace is going to get an opportunity to play a decent amount of snaps. Now, he's not going to play the starter level snaps like Shaq and Josie Jewell, but they're going to trust him to go out there and get him prepared for next season. As I mentioned multiple times on this show, a lot of the moves that they made during the draft back in April were about the future, not about the present, about the future. And presently, that's a guy who can help them this season at linebacker and improves their depth. The depth last year, I felt like, was pretty solid, having a guy like Deion Jones and Kamu Grier-Hill here in Carolina, as they've been starters before. And it dropped off this offseason, but it turns out that they at least have one guy, albeit a rookie, who could help them at that inside linebacker spot this season. But one thing the Panthers need to help is the injury bug to go away, as they picked up a number of injuries again on Thursday. And there is a concern about the secondary, as a couple of players may be out for a significant amount of time. We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked on Panthers. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. In fact, 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Dave Canales was in great spirits when we spoke to him following the Panthers' joint practice against the Jets and the conclusion of their 2024 training camp, as they now shift their focus to the preseason Game 2 against the Jets on Saturday. Then next week, preseason Game 3 against the Buffalo Bills up there in good old Panthers North. And a couple of updates injury-wise that we got to talk about, as it could have been a terrible day. Was not as bad of a day as it turned out to be. We'll start off with Chandler Zavala, who's in there at left guard, as Damian Lewis is still working his way back to conditioning. And I do appreciate that this coaching staff, and probably training staff as well, have been smart about the way they've gone about it with certain players. They know Damian Lewis is going to be their starter. He's someone who they are paying a ton of money to be that starting left guard, a guy they want to depend on and know is a good player. They don't want to press him too much. They want him to be ready to go week 1 in New Orleans. So when he was dealing with the shoulder, they took him out of certain drills and they gave him certain rest days. And when he had to leave for a family matter over the last couple of days, when he came back on Monday, they didn't have him out there in pads. They had him out there getting his conditioning back, running after practice. In the same case again today, he was out there for individual drills, but he was not out there for team period, as they want to get him ramped back up. So Chandler Zavala has got the opportunity to be in with the ones at left guard over the last couple of days. Unfortunately for him, he went down with a hamstring injury on Thursday. I saw him out there not in with the ones and getting wrap. It was a pretty big wrap on his left calf and thigh, not calf, but his left thigh. His left thigh and then hamstring. That's what it turned out to be, was a hamstring injury. And Dave Canales said that they're concerned about it. He thinks that it could be a pretty long one, and that's not good news. We talk about depth here with the offensive line. You saw last week that guys like Ricky Lee, Badara Traore did not play well, and that's not good news. But also, those are guys who I've talked to you about that aren't likely going to be on the roster. Traore is not going to be on the roster at all. He was out there again today, but he's still injured. And if you're not playing, that's the tape you put out there. You're just not going to be on the team. And I don't think that's going to be the case, at least on the 53. Maybe he's a practice squad guy. I think there's probably more value in having someone like Ricky Lee on the practice squad if he's not going to make the active roster. But this is, I think, far worse. Zavala played pretty well, I felt like, last week against the Patriots. And he's someone who has gotten reps last year as a starter, and he's still, I guess, someone that they would want to develop, whether he's going to be a practice squad player or actually make the 53. Not ideal that he is out with that hamstring injury, and that's going to delay his development. Robert Hunt, again, he went out after red zone period with a knee injury. He was carted off, and I was talking to my guy Kyle Bailey of WFNZ, and he was saying, "Is that Hunt who's got carted off?" I was like, I don't know. Maybe it was, and got the confirmation it was Robert Hunt. He came back after getting his knee tested out, and he was back in for the second period, 11v11. So he's totally fine. That's a scare. $100 million man, last person that you want to see going down when you spend all that money to help out Bryce in the interior. And you have Lewis already kind of dealing with his own stuff with the shoulder, but also getting ramped back up. Zavala going down, who's going to be a backup if he makes 53. Hunt, that's somebody that's supposed to be really your bell cow there on an offensive line. Cannot have him go down, so they avoid that kind of injury scare. Another injury scare they avoided, Chuba Hubbard, who again I mentioned during 11v11s, slipped, gets hit pretty hard by Chuck Clark, gets up, and he didn't get carted off. That was the one thing I was trying to figure out when I was talking to people. We didn't ever see him leave the practice area. We really couldn't see either because it was pretty far down. The sight lines just weren't the best standing there in that end zone. But he was out there the whole time, just did not go back in at all during team period. And Dave Canales said that they did testing on his knee, and the initial testing says that seems to be fine, but they'll follow up, and they're going to just take some time there. They're not going to rush him out there, and I would not expect him to play Saturday. And at this point, and knowing that Jonathan Brooks is not ready to go, you got Miles Sanders there too. There's really no reason to play Chuba Hubbard. There are certain guys that you want to see in a preseason. Chuba Hubbard, a running back at that position, I don't need to see that guy in a preseason at all. He's going to take a lot of hits this year, and he took one on Thursday. Fortunately, was able to get back up. The Terrace Marshall thing told you he called that dumb football. Some other injuries as far as just where guys are at. Xavier Legette was out for individual drills, but was not in there at all during the team period. He's still getting ramped up. I would love to see him play on Saturday. I don't know whether that's going to happen or not. Canales has an idea. He told us of who is going to play, who he wants to see play, but he's still going to have to wait until he knows who's available. And that is a valid reason to not tell the media and really the Jets and everybody what his plans are for Saturday. Robert Hunt went out and he came back in, so he's probably fine. But do you want to risk it again during a game? Damian Lewis, he is currently dealing with something as far as conditioning, and Chandler Zavala is not healthy. Do you want to have Chandler Zavala in there? Do you want to have, I guess if Zavala is not available, do you want to have Brady Christensen in there as your starting left guard? I don't think that's a bad thing, but do you want to do that now? Do you want to have a backup in there now who's an experienced starter at that position? Those are questions you have to ask yourself, and it makes me feel like it's just because of the injuries they have the offensive line and the depth there that they may not risk it after having this joint practice. But Legette, your guess is as good as mine. Maybe not. I don't know, but we'll see. Jadeveon Clowney, he took his pads off after that first 11v11 session against the Jets, and it seems like they're really just saving him for the season. That's what Dave said, that they're just getting him to the point where he can be available because he's had injury problems. And Clowney said that when he's healthy, he's a Pro Bowler. He was healthy last year. That was not the case. Maybe it'll be the case here in Carolina this season. They know they need him, and they understand their situation at outside linebacker where one of them, he's not available right now. We don't know when that's going to be. And I was talking to somebody today where that may be a little bit more serious. At least there was something that seemed to be maybe a little bit more serious than we would have expected, and still kind of TBD. No real understanding when he's going to come back. And then Amari Barno as well. They're pretty light there when it comes to talent and just healthy guys at outside linebacker. Don't need to risk Clowney. He's not complaining the preseason at all, and I get that as well. Xavier Woods, he suffered a groin injury, and it's more serious apparently than they thought. Dave Canales did not give us the specific number, but he said it will be a couple of weeks. And if you just look at the calendar right now, today, as I'm talking to you, is Thursday, August 15th. Next Saturday, the 24th, is their last preseason game. Tuesday, the 27th, that's 12 days away. That is their final. I mean, that's when they have to come out with their initial 53-man roster. And you get to the 8th of September, that's week 1. So when you're looking at it right now, 1, 2, 3, they got 3.5 weeks to figure out whether he's going to be ready to go. And when he says a couple weeks, doesn't make me feel like that confident that Xavier Woods is going to be ready to go maybe week 1. And that would make sense why the Panthers went out and signed Rudy Ford, who started 15 games over the last couple seasons with the Packers. That's who they signed on Wednesday. And he's going to have to play potentially early, as they had to find out whether Xavier Woods is going to be back. Now, the good thing is they have guys like Nick Scott and like Jordan Fuller who know the scheme and are considered as starters along with Xavier Woods there at that safety position. You also have a guy like Alex Cook who stepped up, picked off Aaron Rodgers, as I mentioned, and now Rudy Ford. Still deep enough there at the safety position and one of the deeper positions on the roster, and they're going to get to test out that depth, unfortunately, as they're going to wait for Xavier Woods. One other injury that I buried this at the end of the show, which is significant. I'm sure you've probably seen it. Dane Jackson, he suffered what Dave Canales described as a significant hamstring injury, and they're looking at 6 weeks. So looking at it right now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's going to be potentially he's back at the beginning of October. That's what we're looking at right now. And that he would miss the Saints game. He would miss the Chargers game. He would miss the Raiders game. And then I guess that's what, let's see. I'm trying to look at my calendar, right? So 1, 2, 3, he would miss the Bengals game potentially. So that's maybe a guy who starts off on PUP just so the Panthers can have a roster spot if they're saying it's going to be 6 weeks. So 6 weeks from today is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That is September 26th. And if you're missing all that time, I don't think you're going to be available to go for that game against Cincinnati on the 29th. So we're looking at the 6th against, I don't even have the schedule right in front of me, but I'm looking at the 6th of October. As I delay, let's see who the Panthers play in week 5. Week 5 against the Bears in Chicago. So that may be the first time we get to see Dane Jackson. And this now spells out the Panthers' need to bring in a vet. And God, I hate again that this is at the end of the show because I don't know. Some of you watch, listen, may not listen all the way to the end. I appreciate everybody who does, but I understand we get busy, we got things to do. I was talking to my dad about this because I just kind of was having this thought the other night about the appetite for people to want Stephon Gilmore here. And I totally get it. You want the Panthers to win. You don't want to hear from me saying that, this is a rebuilding year. This team's not going to be any good again. Like, you don't want to hear about drafting number 1, number 2, you don't want to hear about that. You want to hear about this team having a surprise season and being the story of the NFL. That's what you want to hear. I just don't know if that's going to be the reality of the season, even though there are things that I like. There's also things I don't like about this team. One thing I'm thinking about right now is, if you sign Stephon Gilmore, as great as that is, it's not going to change the trajectory of their season. He really is not going to do that. For me, it feels like they need to just be focused on the younger guys, like DiCaprio Bootle, like Lamar Jackson, like Deshaun Jameson, and seeing what they have in them. Obviously, they want to see what they have in Dane Jackson and whether he's someone worth investing in. They want to see J.C. Horn stay healthy. I just don't think it makes that much sense to spend money in any cap space on an older player who, yes, is a good player, but someone who's not going to lead you to be a contender. I think it makes more sense to see what you have, to give the younger guys an opportunity. And that's what this team needs to be doing anyways. They need to be drafting and developing. And if you can develop undrafted free agents into players who can help you as twos, maybe one day develop into a starter, that's a positive. I think that makes way more sense for this team and where they're at than going out there and spending money on a veteran corner. Like, I still think that they should add someone, but not go out and spend free agent money. If they want to add someone, do it via the waiver wire. And based off of where Dane Jackson is with that injury and likely going to be out probably the first 4 weeks, listening to Dave Canales, it makes more sense to me for them to pick up somebody off the street via waivers after roster cutdowns in 12 days than it does to go out and spend whatever money on a starting caliber player like Stephon Gilmore. That's just me. I know you probably disagree because you want Gilmore to be here because he's a local guy and he's good and all that, but I don't think it changes that much. Would rather just them go out, develop the guys I already have, and then on waivers claim somebody that way opposed to spending the money. So that's just where I stand there. But Dane Jackson being injured, not ideal. Lamar Jackson, it feels like he would be the starter opposite of J.C. Horn at this point in time. And of all these injuries around, knock on wood, J.C. Horn is still healthy and that is obviously a good thing for the Carolina Panthers. But that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all, subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where I will be answering your weekly Wednesday mailbag questions again next week. So either at me or DM me, but of course, follow me on Twitter at Julian Council. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding. And I'll be back with you live here on Saturday evening, approximately 11 o'clock on YouTube, maybe earlier, as we break down the preseason game number 2 versus the Jets. Will the starters play? I don't know, but I'll be here, and that's what I do know. So I'll talk to y'all then.